Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Wellness FOURplay podcast. I am Dr. Dondee Nettles, and tonight I'm going to actually do part one. We're episode 51, part one of 4 health lessons I wish I had learned sooner. I'm going to talk about 4 different categories over today and tomorrow. I'm first going to talk about mindset, and I'm going to do 4 different categories, 2 different options for each category for a total of 8, which is why today's part one. Tomorrow will be part two. But we're going to talk about mindset first. Then I'm going to talk about nutrition. Then we're going to talk about fitness and sports participation. And then lastly, we're going to end up with recreation or hobbies, because wellness is an all around balance in your life. If all areas of your life are well, in your physical, in your emotional, in your psychological, in your professional, in your spiritual, in your intimate, in your family life, in your job, your personal, then you are going to have ultimately wellness. Wellness is a very, very multifaceted thing. So we're going to talk tonight about nutrition and mindset. And then tomorrow we're going to talk about physical fitness and sports participation and hobbies and recreation. So the 4 things that I want to talk about. And by the way, if you're catching the Wellness FOURplay podcast for the first time, welcome. Please do me a favor. If you're watching this on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube, or you're catching it on the podcast, the actual audio version of the podcast on Spotify, thank you so much. I truly appreciate you tuning in. I hope you get value from this. If you do get value, I would totally appreciate it and love it if you would share it out. But if you're on Facebook or you're on LinkedIn or you're on YouTube and you're watching live, please do me a favor and put hashtag live in the comments. And I actually have the comments turned on tonight for the first time. I just figured out how to do that. Michael Epstein, good to see you. Hagen, good to see you. Pam, good to see you. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And again, if you're catching this on the replay, put hashtag replay in the comments. If you're on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube, and if you're catching this on the audio version of Spotify, on Apple iTunes, or what was formerly iTunes, now Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or any of those other platforms, again, I am eternally grateful that you're tuning in. So let's get into tonight's episode, which again, in summary or in review, are 4 health lessons I wish I had learned sooner. And we're going to start off with mindset. So the first thing I want to challenge you all to do is, when you think you know it all, question yourself. Just constantly continue to question or challenge what you think you know. Because once you think you learned everything you can learn, or once you think you know it all, you literally start aging much more rapidly and you stop growing, because you could literally learn new things well into your 80th or your 8th and your 9th and beyond decade of life. You can teach an old dog new tricks. But when you get egotistical and you think you know everything, you literally start aging much more rapidly, and you close yourself off to new learning and new understanding and a deeper understanding and knowledge of things. So challenge yourself on what you think you know. I love Coach John Wooden's quote, and it says, "It's what we learn after we think we know it all that matters." So the number one thing about mindset, as far as learning anything about health and wellness or anything in general, this literally applies. Challenge what you think you know. In other words, do your own research. And I would say question authority, even your own authority that you think you have, because the more knowledgeable you can become, and the more studious you can become, and the more ravenous for knowledge that you can become, the more valuable you are to yourself, your family, and the world, especially as it relates to health and wellness knowledge. So, number one, challenge what you think you know. Now, the other thing about mindset is this one has been on many different circumstances in my life, and many different times in my life. I have learned this the hard way. And the number 2 thing I want to share with you guys, which is a health lesson I wish I would have learned earlier, and that is, life is really short. You go to bed, you're 19, and you wake up and you're 45. It goes by that fast. It just does. and kids grow up too fast. I'm about to have my 40th high school reunion this year, and it seems literally like it was just yesterday walking down and getting my diploma with my uncomfortable green cap and gown on, Go Homestead Mustangs. But it was life is really, really short. Respect your time. Do not waste your time. Do not put off till tomorrow something you can do for your health goals today, because it will literally catch up on you. It'll creep up on you, and the regret will come. And regret, I have to tell you, really sucks. So I hope that doesn't happen to you. Ellen, thank you so much for joining. I'm glad you're here. So, number two, again, is life is really, really short. Respect life, do things when you're prompted, and I would say go with your gut feeling, go with your initial inspiration, whether it be to join that team or take that class or whatever, and literally respect time because it goes by so, so quickly. And as I'm telling you that, one of the most embarrassing moments I've ever had in the gym, and it goes back to what you challenge yourself, especially when you think you know it all, or challenge what you think you know. I remember I was single, I was newly single, and I was in really good shape. And I had joined, this was in when I was living in Northern California. Gold's Gym was the stuff. And I had just got a new membership at Gold's Gym. And I wanted to, there was this girl behind the counter that I had my eye on. And I wanted to know when she was working. I found out when she was working, asked some of her coworkers, and I came in there, and they had, between the last time I had left the gym and walking in the gym this day, they had this new sign at the front desk that said Pilates classes, starting soon. And I'd never even heard of Pilates, and it's spelled Pilates. And I'm looking at the sign and I'm like, did they mean to say pirates and they spelled it wrong? But it was like, no, because it was mentioned a couple different times, and each time it said the word, it had an L in it. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to act like I know what's going on. And I walk up to this girl that I totally had my eye on. I go, so when do the pilates classes start? And she just looked at me, kind of even laughed under her breath. She goes, you mean Pilates? I'm like, yeah, that. She goes, next week. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I never went back in. I knew when her shifts were. I never went back in another time when she was working. But so when you think you know, challenge what you think you know, especially when it comes to acting like you're confident about something when you're not. You could end up just embarrassing yourself like I did in that situation. So number three, the number three lesson I wish I would have learned sooner is regarding nutrition. And it is, you are what you eat. What you put on your fork and you put in your mouth and you start to chew and swallow, whatever your meal is, in other words, you are literally asking that source of whatever it is to make blood with, to make bones with, to make muscles and tendons and ligaments and skin and heart muscles and hair. And every single part of your body is made of the raw materials that come from the food that you eat. Food is fuel, not convenience, though it can be, not what tastes good, though it can. You should be focusing on what goes on your plate, on your fork, spoon, knife, whatever, or your chopsticks, whatever it is that you are using to fuel your body. Respect it and realize that you are what you eat. And I think if you understand that intimately, you'll probably make better nutritional choices. And I remember growing up, it's whatever was readily available to take me from being hungry to not hungry. I literally read no labels. I could care less. If it tasted good and it was easily accessible, it was in my mouth and my body was making me, reproducing me with that, whatever it was. Whether it was a root beer in the refrigerator, whether it was a cucumber, whether it was a carrot or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or a bologna sandwich. I'm going all the way back to childhood. And when my mom used to make me these bologna and ketchup sandwiches on white Wonder Bread, I was like the worst kid in class because, or at the lunch line, because nobody wanted to trade this pink dough bologna sandwich with me. And I was looking at kids eating like wheat bread and with lettuce hanging out the side. And what do I have? Bologna and ketchup. You did great, Mom. And I stopped that lesson there. I did not. And I did think that I knew it all, that bologna sandwiches with ketchup and white Wonder Bread were not to be carried over in my family tree. So that is one exception based on rule number one that I mentioned earlier tonight. And I'm not poking fun at mom. Yes, I am. But anyway, so nutrition, you are what you eat. Make good choices when you know that whatever you are chewing and swallowing, you are asking your body to recreate you with that as the fuel. Kind of think back to the three little pigs in the Big Bad Wolf story. What were the pigs making their homes from? Straw, wood, and brick. And what happened when the big bad wolf came around? The brick house was the only one standing. Make your body a brick house, meaning choose good nutrition, choose food for the fuel and the good nutritional quality that it is, rather than its convenience, its price, its taste, or its accessibility. Good tip there. And then number 4, be adventurous with food. This is something I wish I had done way earlier in my life. And I remember when I was in probably my mid to late 20s, and my cousin Philip had just graduated from EMT school. And we went out with the family, and he wanted to, it was to, as his prize or his celebration for graduating EMT school, it was dinner wherever you wanted to go. And he wanted sushi. I'd never had sushi before. All I knew that it was raw fish, and I didn't even like cooked fish very much. And I remember going and watching my cousin Philip eat sushi, and just, he was like in heaven, and everyone else was eating sushi. And they asked me if I wanted some. I said, absolutely not. I will never, ever eat that. Never. And I was literally disgusted because I was just thinking it's raw fish. Now, was I curious what it tastes like? Absolutely not. I was like literally mortified that somebody would even eat that. I was almost throwing up just watching. So I ate teriyaki chicken, the non-sushi item on the menu for people, teriyaki chicken when you go to an awesome sushi restaurant. But I remember that day that of all the things he could have chosen, he chose sushi. And I thought, wow, we kind of grew up in the same era. We're almost the same age. Our parents were friends. My dad and his dad were best friends growing up. How could we be so different on the food palette? And he had been eating sushi his whole life. And I was like, you know what? Maybe someday I'll try it. Well, it wasn't until probably 7 or 8 years later, when I had graduated chiropractic college, and I went out with my mentor at the time, Dr. Ken Savage, took me to this sushi restaurant. And I'll never forget, this is again, when you question what you think you know. So we're sitting at this sushi restaurant, and they bring over the plate with what I now know as wasabi and some slices of ginger. And I remember not knowing what it was, this like pink yellowy stuff in thin slices. I picked it up and I smelled it, and it smelled kind of like soap. So I start rubbing my hands with it and like washing my hands, and even kind of rubbing it on my face. And I grabbed, and they had this little hot towel. It was actually a pretty cool sushi restaurant. It came with a hot towel, and I grabbed the hot towel, and I thought, that's just what you kind of wash your face off after you rub this. I didn't even know it was ginger. Again, be adventurous with food. And I remember people around me were just like, what in the hell is he doing? And Dr. Savage was like not saying anything. Probably if we would have had videos and we had cameras on our phones back then, he would have been videoing that, and it would have gone on his Facebook page that night. But I'll never forget, because I thought I knew what it was because of how it smelled. And I didn't pay attention to what other people were doing, because nobody would have been rubbing ginger on their face and washing their hands with it. And I remember feeling really embarrassed, but why I told you that, because that is how my first sushi experience started. And I remember, guess what I started off with? Some teriyaki chicken, just to be safe. And then I tried some unagi, which is freshwater eel. Loved it. I tried some maguro, which is tuna. Loved it. I tried some taco, which is octopus. Loved it. And then as I'm eating this stuff and I'm liking it, it's like, I'm going to try everything. And I almost tried everything on the menu. And from that moment forward, I fell in love with sushi, and it is by far my favorite food. If I could have like my ideal dinner, it would be sushi, because there's so much versatility to it, and I absolutely loved it. But I remember being in my mid-20s, literally being nauseated by watching someone eat it, because I thought I knew what it was, and I was zero adventure with regard to food. Well, from that moment forward, I said to myself, I will try anything. If someone considers it food and they're actually eating it, I will watch first. And I learned that lesson. I will watch. If someone else is eating it, I'll try it. I will try anything once. And I've pretty much lived up to that. And I have learned that I love Ethiopian food. I love Greek food. I love all kinds. I just love all kinds of food. Indian food, some of my favorite in the whole world. But I think probably sushi and Ethiopian food are my one and two. Now Chinese and Italian, things that we grew up with, pizza, but it's like be adventurous with your food. Make sure it's good nutrition, make sure it's good ingredients, but because it's about wellness, the more adventurous you can become, the more options you have when you're hungry and your friends are hungry, rather than limiting your choices to only one kind of food. I know people like that. I used to be that guy. It's like I'll have a hamburger, pizza, or a hot dog, and that's about it. Forget the raw fish. Now I'll eat literally anything. It doesn't even have to be dead if other people are eating it. And I've had some pretty interesting food choices and some pretty interesting food experiences that, you know what? I said I'd do it once. I won't ever do it again. But then there's other things, because I said it, I would do it once. I tried it and loved it. I will do it endless times because it seems pretty gross until you try it. Like chocolate covered crickets, as an example, or scorpions, as an example, or road apples, as an example. So, in all kinds of things I have eaten because other people considered them food, some of them even delicacies. And I can't wait to go to the Philippines because I've got some things on my list that I want to try, balut being one of them. If you know what that is, wish me luck when we get to the Philippines. But I want to now, in summary, talk about the 4 health lessons I wish I would have learned sooner. And that is 1, question yourself. When you think you know it all, question yourself. In other words, challenge what you think you know. Number 2, life is really, really short. Act like that accordingly and take advantage of things in the now. Number 3, you are what you eat, and food is fuel. And number 4, be adventurous with your food. You'll thank me later. Have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for tuning into the Wellness FOURplay podcast, where 4 a day keeps the gray away. And that's what we're all about here at the Wellness FOURplay podcast. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care and God bless.